محمد يا محمد.
So yeah, Assad's regime's gone. One thing I was really surprised recently is the amount of statues Assad had. Like the amount of videos I've seen about like people tearing down statues is like, because when I was looking at this one, I was like, oh, I actually remember this statue being torn down in a different video, and now I see it like being dragged down through the streets of Damascus in this video. So I think it sort of speaks of the person or of the government that Assad represented, this sort of cult of personality. His dynasty or the him and his father have been ruling Syria for I believe over 50 years, a long time, and almost in a blink of an eye, it's gone. I mean, I wanted to also show one more thing. We've talked about this yesterday, and I showed a picture of how it looked. And basically, people might remember this was the status quo for about 5 years. Then the picture I showed yesterday was this one, which showed that the red is the Assad's regime control, and we've seen how much it fell. And today it's this, and this might already be probably it's probably already late. It's completely gone. Besides, I believe there might be still two Russian bases that Russians are in control and haven't been fully kicked out. But for the most part, it is gone in just a week. I mean, Mark, this the Syrian civil war. It's something that almost became. I mean, for vast majority of my life, this civil war was like in the process, and yeah, I mean, we'll talk about it if this really means the end of the Syrian civil war or just the end of Assad's regime. But I mean, Mark, what's your reaction when you've seen? How have you been watching? Because the first action started about a week ago at the end of November, um, but in the last few days it completely spilled over.
Well, there's nothing I love more than when a tyrant falls. Yes, they are all cults of personality. They love statues of themselves, posters and paintings and murals of themselves all over their cities or the countries that they rule. And it is a thing of beauty to watch the people tear those posters down, decapitate the statues, and drag their bronzed and plastered bodies through the streets of Damascus and Aleppo. It's a thing of beauty when the people revolt against authoritarianism. I think they owe a great deal of their capacity to even do this to Israel. I think Israel has exposed Hezbollah for being a paper tiger. They've exposed Iran, uh, both of whom were assisting the Assad regime. And Russia is, of course, overextended itself in the Ukraine and is utterly weak and now relying on North Korean troops to do its fighting for it. And I'm sure that situation will worsen if hopefully the Trump administration doesn't completely defund the Ukraine. And that means all of their allies are stretched too thin, and this enabled some freedom fighters. We hope they are Islamicists, but they claim to be moderates to come in and topple a shit regime with a shit leader who whose plane disappeared about a half an hour after takeoff. So we're only hoping that when it flew over rebel territory, somebody shot that thing down and took Assad with it. So it's always a great day when tyrants go down.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen, so when it comes to sort of whereabouts of Assad, we sort of don't know. It's said, just yesterday I was talking about how there was a plane that flew away from Damascus, and I think it was actually the plane that Assad was in. But the plane flew away at the same time when Assad was saying he's staying in Damascus. He's like, or he's staying in Syria, maybe specifically. So then we've heard something from Russians that Assad is safe, that he will allow for a peaceful transition of power, which is, I mean, I guess one way of saying you've been taken over. And also, I mean, I don't know how much. I mean, Mark, you are on X, but I don't know how much you follow the types of Jackson Hinkle and
I
Syrian
hate,
girl or whatever.
I hate those fuckers. They're the worst human beings on the planet. And whatever they say is full of shit. It's a lie. You can automatically assume it's a lie. And look, remember, the Russians said Brezhnev had a cold. He didn't have a cold. He was dead. And so we can assume the same thing with the Syrian leader. The good news is the prime minister over there in Syria has remained there and has agreed to a peaceful transition of power. Of course, he has no real choice in the matter, but at least he's got some brains. Anyway, what were you going to say about these horrible people, Hinkle and
It's just really fun to watch them now really like fall apart. I mean, Jackson Hinkle is talking about the NATO coup in Romania for the last few days or something. So he's like jumping between that. But he's like jumping on every single Russian propaganda he can find about how Assad is still doing great. It's all amazing. And as people say in the chat, Syrian girl also is one of those. By the way, it's someone living in Australia who's just like posting from there, but
such
it's
such a hypocrite. What a hypocrite.
uh,
Horrible.
I think I really like Chandler in the chat says, "What's Aleppo?" which is the famous clip from Kerry,
Johnson.
which was pretty funny. But yeah, so
I still voted for that guy over the opposition. So what is
yeah,
that?
I mean, at least from my understanding of that specific clip, it was like sort of out of context. Like the question about Syria was asked like out of context to everything else, so he might have been just thinking something else.
Behind. He's also far
Oh
behind.
yeah, or that. But yeah, well, I don't want to talk about Gary Johnson, but from the libertarian candidates, he was one of the better ones, I'd say. Um, but yeah, sort of now the question is really like what will happen now? I mean, it is talk, Assad's regime is gone. So that was sort of when it comes to a civil war, that was what civil war was against. It was against Assad's regime. That's what united all the rebels. That's what united even the Kurdish-led militias in the northeast. But now you have a situation where, again, you might say, it's over, but the rebels are not necessarily, something that you get from when you don't have a real philosophy behind you, when the only sort of like goal is like replace one group with another group. Uh, there happens to be a lot of infighting as soon as the main group that you were opposing is gone. So even now we have the sort of between the rebels there is a split. So there is the biggest one, the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or I think it's HTS is usually referred to as. But so they are, for those who don't know, they were they were either like directly cooperating with al-Qaeda or they were basically al-Qaeda. The current leader was part of it, but have since reformed and are sort of like as I've seen somewhere said, the DEI jihadists. They're more inclusive. They're more willing to cooperate. I think it was even said somewhere that they are willing to accept sort of the Kurdish parts as like part of Syria. So we'll have to see. I mean, there were some skirmishes between those rebels and the Kurds, as well as, even the rebels are not united because you had the more jihadists, but you also had the sort of seemingly more secular rebels, as well as you have some rebels that were trained by the US Army. Those are sort of, again, more sort of secular. Then you have some that are, willing to go for some sort of democracy. As you mentioned, the prime minister of Syria is willing to sort of, I mean, not like he has much of a choice in that matter, but do some sort of transition of power. That's what the rebels also say. They are willing to accept some slow, gradual transition of power. But who am I? Who am I forgetting? Am I forgetting any group? I mean, Mark, where do you think we're going from here?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I don't hold democracy as a value. And all of these groups are potentially
Oh,
suspect.
sorry. I know what I just wanted to add. The main group, the HTS, the rebels are like outwardly saying, yeah, no democracy. We will not accept any kind of democracy. They are, as I've said, they are sort of like reformed. And when they were taking over the cities, they didn't massacre civilians and like plunder. Um, so that's why I mean we'll talk a little bit about how the West sees it or how the Western leaders see
Oh,
it. But
reformed could just mean that they understand that they shouldn't massacre citizens because they have to get them temporarily on their side before they institute a theocracy. Now, I mean, could this be a situation like Iran in 1979, where one dictator is deposed to bring in something worse? That's highly possible. I mean, it's in the Islamicist war playbook to lie about who they are and what they are during wartime in order to win the battle. That's sort of what they care about. I don't see any liberal democratic movements having any real force in Syria. It's always promising to have one authoritarian deposed, but we don't know what's going to replace the power vacuum over there. It could arguably be worse.
yeah, I mean, sort of the way, at least I've seen some people from the West, speaking about it. Pretty much everybody is united behind. It's great to see Assad's regime gone. I mean, the amount of, just on the basic level, you had the sort of standard Middle Eastern, not having a clue what individual rights are, but even specifically to Assad, the amount of atrocities that happen under his regime was, you could speak for hours about it. And so from especially with some of the rebels, the way the West has been speaking about is, now is the time for Syria to do better. The guy, I'm not sure if I have his name, but the leader of this rebel group seems like, he wants to be reformed. He wants to do something better. But again, the big part of them is they still want to implement Sharia law across Syria. That is just the fact. They are not running away from them. They are not saying, we are willing to compromise on that. This is sort of like the standard. They are a jihadi group. They came out of al-Qaeda. It You'd be hard pressed to, really run away from this fact, as well as, even the all of Syria is again not united under one group. You still have the Kurdish parts in the northeast. Not to mention American bases are also there. So once let's say once fighting starts happening between the Kurdish parts and the rebels, what's going to happen then? There are, as I said, there are American bases there. Not to mention Turkey is also supporting some militias there again to fight against the Kurds or to create basically buffer zone between Turkey and the Kurdish part. So, um, I mean, Mark, anything to add to that?
No, it's chaos as usual in that region. I maintain a certain degree of crazy optimism that somehow this chaos will sort itself out. I think Israel has the right perspective. They've created a nice buffer zone there in Syria, and anticipating anything that could happen there. That the regime could turn against them, or that the regime could ally itself with Israel against its enemies. So, it's anybody's guess. If they want to enforce Sharia law over there, I think it's despicable and disgusting, and it's going from the frying pan to the fire, in my view. But as long as they don't try to export that stuff to the rest of the world, that's their business.
Yeah, I mean, if there is anything sort of positive coming out of these rebels, it's the sort of unification because they were fighting against the Assad regime, which was supported by Hezbollah, by Iran, by Russia. Now, what you oftentimes see from the Western leaders, or what you will probably see, is again that sort of pragmatism. Well, they are also against Iran. They are also against Hezbollah. They are against Russia. So we'll support another, another uh, like jihadi group, another type of like Sharia law enforcing nation just because they are fighting against Iran. And you know,
I mean, yeah,
yeah.
I expect, since Assad is gone, the one thing that keeps these disparate groups together, that coheres them, is their hatred for the regime. And once that's gone, there's going to be plenty of infighting. The reason I don't care so much about Sharia law being instituted in that state, so long as it's not exported elsewhere, is it's a primitivizing element to society. That to me, it makes them non-threatening. It's anti-intellectual, anti-progressive, anti-liberal, and the society will just sort of slowly regress to a Stone Age level of existence. And to me, states like that aren't a threat to anyone.
Yeah, I mean, just
Anything, if anything, it could provide a healthy stream of Syrian immigrants who want to come to the United States and educate themselves and become secularized and productive members of a free society.
yeah, I mean something. So something you have mentioned, but I think it's worth to talk about. Basically, Israel has a border with Syria, specifically the Golan Heights that were taken by Israel from Syria in the Six-Day War, I believe, right? Yeah. So basically, after that, I think in like 73, if I remember, there was sort of like an agreement between Israel and Syria to establish basically sort of like a buffer zone, sort of like a basically like a secure zone between Israel and Syria. But the deal was with Assad's regime basically. Now with that gone, there is no more deal. So what has happened is these posts in Syria that were there have now been taken over by Israel. So Israel is now actively in Syria. Basically, at least what Netanyahu has said, it is like a basically temporary thing to make sure you don't have just random rebels now going into Israel or going into Golan Heights. So we'll see where it goes from there. There were already, I believe, some clashes between the rebels and Israel, as well as I think. I'm not sure if it was the rebels or the Assad regime, but they've also attacked a UN post on the border that Israel had to then defend, which was pretty interesting to see.
Ironic.
That sorry, yeah. Um,
Ironic.
so for which I also I think it was the Syrian girl on X who was already like, oh, this is Israel's plan to take over all of Syria, or this is Israel's plan to like take over Syria, which was
Okay.
well, on one way, it's like it's kind of funny to see them like seeing Israel behind everything, and many people already are. Many people already are saying like that basically Israel is like actively fighting with the rebels or like coordinating with the rebels to fight the Assad's regime, despite the fact that they've already had clashes between them. Uh, but it's also the like many people try to like do conspiracism about Israel's secret deals with the rebels, but also speaking more openly, it's like, why would you be surprised that Israel is doing something in Syria? I mean, Israel's direct enemies, Hezbollah and Iran, are actively in Syria, and Israel is actively, hitting sites in Syria when it needs to. Again, this is not like a some type of like conspiracism, some type of like, oh, this is like it again. It makes sense. You have active threat against you in those regions. You will get involved in those regions again. I mean, Mark, why
Yeah,
do you
but
think? Yeah.
it becomes nefarious when it's Jews defending themselves. Then it becomes they become the puppet masters trying to assert hegemony over the entire region.
Yeah, I mean, there's also the fact that because I think in some, and I think even the leader of the one of the rebel groups has said that I don't know if it was a direct quote or if it was just like in context, but it said that Israel did help the rebel groups to fight against Assad's regime, which is not again is also not unbelievable to see. It doesn't mean there is a direct connection. I mean, if if Assad's regime is supported by Hezbollah and Iran, and Israel wipes out Hezbollah for the most part and destroys a lot of um, destroys some parts of Iran or some sites in Iran, yeah, of course it's gonna help it. Not to mention, again, Israel has a interest here. The way Hezbollah has been supported was through Syria. It was through convoys through Syria. So again, Israel had, in my way, Israel had every right to bomb sites in Syria. Israel has every right to even, again, take over the sites in Syria. I mean, Israel has to, first and foremost, it has to make sure to protect its citizens, to protect the rights of its citizens. Someone in the
That
chat
makes you
says,
that makes you a Zionist pig.
well, I guess at some point you just have to take that badge. Someone in the chat yells, or at least says with caps lock, Daniel, are you Russian? Uh, I am. I am a Russian spy agent, put here to argue against Assad's regime. No, I'm slow. Basically, if you hear a Slavic accent, and is arguing against Russia, then he's probably not Russian. He's probably any other country that is actively, not a big fan of Russia. Not that many Slavic nations that are big fans of Russia. Uh, but yeah, I mean, Mark, any last words? I mean, this is again, it's great to see. It's great to see how quickly it fell apart. But yeah, now we really have to brace ourselves for what's going to happen next. And also remember that, you don't support Soviet Union just because they're fighting the Nazis. And in a similar way, you don't support jihadists just because they are fighting a different type of jihadists or a different type of Islamists.
And this is what we have done. I'll remain cautiously optimistic because I prefer optimism over pessimism, but I get the sense that if their goal is to establish some form of Sharia law over there, that's a step, that's a retrograde step, it's a regressive step, and they're going to have lots of factions vying for power over there, and I'm sure their quote unquote moderation will start to disappear in the conflict between those factions. So um, let's hope this guy's really telling the truth and he is moderate and he does want to reform, but he'd have to reform, of course, Islam as well as the government itself. And let's hope that he wants peace with Israel and that perhaps some kind of peace could be forged between that state. And then Israel would have a peace with three Arab states that I think could make the prospects of this Palestinian conflict much less optimistic for the Palestinians.
I mean, even something that I would definitely want to see much more is the fall of the regime in Iran, because that's again, that's where everything leads. Every pretty much at this point, it's all coming from Iran. It's all a support, talking about the Houthis, talking about, I mean, the Assad regime itself, talking about the militias in Iraq, the Hezbollah, what am I forgetting? Hamas. I mean, it's all supported by Iran, and especially now when Iran is really feeling threatened, and it really needs those nukes. It really needs those nukes to defend itself, and they are getting close.
Israel will not let that happen, even though I've heard they've been upgrading their uranium intake at one particular facility that's embedded in the mountains. That facility is not long for the world, and if they continue to enrich uranium to the degree that they are, Israel will simply not let that happen. And I hope that a Trump administration will not let that happen and that they unite with Israel in destroying that nuclear facility and taking away the Trump card. Sorry for the pun that Iran has, and that will completely crumble the regime. I think the year 2025 may be the time that we see the end of the Khomeinis and the rigid Islamic regime in Iran, and we see it replaced with something more liberal. That would be great too, because that again would hobble the Palestinian insane Islamicist movement that's going on there and force them into some other form of uh, political outlook, perhaps even a two-state solution where they're no longer Islamicist assholes who want to murder Jews.
We have a super chat from Bonnie. Thank you so much. And yeah, I think you said it well. Like, you know, now is really time for Iran to be gone. They have pretty much no allies in the region. All of their proxies have been either really destroyed or or are on a brink of collapse. Their major ally, Russia, is is not doing so well either. So now is really time to push back. Now is going back to Ukraine, now is really not the time to sort of agree to any sort of peace. I mean, now is really the time to, uh, it feels so
Unfortunately,
close.
Trump thinks he can make deals with these people. I think it has to be the opposite. You have to press your advantage now. They are stumbling, they are falling, they are crumbling under their own weight. Even China, the one that the Republicans are trying to get us all in our panties in a wad about, they're in a state of economic free fall. They are looking to these conflicts right now to see what the United States does, and if the United States pushes its fingers on the scale to help crumble Iran, to help push the Ukrainian victory over Russia, and maybe even joining NATO, which is precisely what Moscow's afraid of. In fact, so many other states are now trying to join NATO now. I think this is all a good sign. The world, in many ways, is turning against these tyrannies that have had power for decades and decades and decades.
Yeah, so again, we'll be following. I mean, the situation in Syria from day to day is evolving in so many ways that it completely changes, and there is a new thing to talk about. So we'll be following it closely, and if necessary, we'll talk about it again. We'll continue talking about a little bit more on our episode of the reality show Extra today. That's I'm putting the link in the chat. That's for YouTube members and ARCUK UK website members only. But it's also much more interactive. We talk with people much more. But Mark, any last thoughts?
Viva la freedom. All right, let's hope freedom is on the march around the world again.
Let's definitely hope for the best and for for the best people within Syria to really try to do the best they can. Now there is a chance to try something, and we'll see where it goes. But all right, well,
Wait, speaking of freedom, don't forget to go to my Twitter, Mark R. Pellegrino. Go to my profile. You'll see AmericanCapitalistParty.org. Click on it, read our policies, donate, become a member. Let's get this party up and running. We're already registered with the IRS. We're going to be at Freedom Fest in the Freedom Con in Washington, D.C., February 7th through the 10th. So join it, be a part of this historic movement. Let's take advantage of the fact that people are sick of the typical left and right, and there's a massive group of politically homeless people that are looking for true liberalism to reassert itself out there. So join up, become a member, become a part of history now.
definitely you'll be able to find that link in the description. But now we're going to the reality show Extra. Thank you again, everybody, for watching. Thank you, Mark, for joining me today. We'll see you in a bit. Bye bye.